You're listening to 1232, an audio epic, produced by RumbleStump Entertainment. Chapter 28.
She's won! It's over! We gave you all we had, and the devil took the rest. I say let her have it. I'm leaving.
Shouted a thin woodsman at the back of the crowd. The handful of survivors were now joined by the priest, and Rhona and Flint, with little Daffeth holding tightly to their hands. The cold only added to their misery, and no one started a fire.
No, stay, I pray you. We must not abandon the cause of freedom, for God has not abandoned us.
Then where's he been then?
Shouted the woodsman, whose comment stirred a current of murmurs among the people. Cried an old man, a respected horseman and hunter, one among them whose skills would be sorely missed.
If God is here, why does he send such judgment upon us?
Another woman called out, followed by others, until the place echoed with their questions and demands. It was impossible to distinguish one voice from another in the roar. Cardigan searched the crowd, his troubled eyes finally resting on the priest's face, questioning what he should say. Rhona looked at Flint, and he understood her meaning. He agreed, too. There was nothing left to fight for. They were outnumbered and overmatched, and now they had to face winter, hiding in a forest that had been destroyed, the game mostly gone. Flint returned her gaze with a nod.
I know. Too bad. If the fire hadn't got out of control, they might have had a chance. We might have had a chance. There could be one if Rhona and I surrendered. These guys might do better, and we might leave. Who am I kidding? What can we do at this point?
Flint brought his thoughts back around and noticed the look in his sister's eyes. The one she got right before she was about to do something really brave. Or really stupid. Rhona turned to the crowd and waded in, pushing people aside as she made her way to the middle. A stunning sight, still in the same clothes she wore when she met Flint at the lawyer's office, back in Dallas, Texas, in the 21st century. Her long red hair was still tied up in a ponytail, hanging loose behind her back. The t-shirt she wore under her motorcycle jacket was covered in horsehair. Her jeans, tearing at the knees, and her combat boots were covered in mud. She swaggered through like a gangster, comically contrasting her medieval surroundings.
Hey! Get out of my way! Hey, knock it off!
She yelled at them as they continued to shout nonsensically. She got in the horseman's face, pointing her finger.
You! Shut up!
She stepped up on a barrel and whistled loudly. Rhona now had the floor.
I don't know what you people expect. What did you think this was, a walk in the park? Huh? Did you think this guy
She pointed to Cardigan, who was still standing on the table.
guaranteed you success? You are at war. History is full of cases where the underdog whips the Nazis or throws out the redcoats. But you don't know that, do you? You can't see past your own losses. Well, let me tell you people something.
We don't need no woman talking.
A heckler shouted at her, but she turned to face him.
Hey, you better shut your mouth.
She said, pointing directly at the heckler, shooting daggers from her eyes. The heckler turned red and promptly looked down.
You've already come this far. You're cowards not to finish this fight. God might be in charge, but you're here to get the job done. If you want to be run over for the next 500 years by people who can scare you into slavery, fine. That's what you're giving the generations to come. A life of slavery. If that's what you want, then you can go right ahead and give up. But if you want freedom, if you want to write your own history, don't quit. Do not quit. You signed up for this, remember? It's still your problem, not just Cardigan's. That's the bottom line.
She hopped off the barrel, staring the people down, with fire in her green eyes as she straightened her jacket. Then she walked out, people parting the way, leaving a hush in her wake. She couldn't believe what she'd just done. It was totally unlike her to even care, and Flint knew it. When she brushed past him, she saw the look of astonishment on his face.
I don't know what's happening to me.
Darkness fell, and a heavy storm came over the mountains, bringing sleet and freezing rain. Deserters continued to trickle away during the night. Only the hungry were left, many of them wounded. The future of the resistance now rested on the shoulders of a courageous few. Cardigan sat pale and drained, leaning his back against the wall of the cave.
Prison was nothing compared to defeat. At least in prison, hope was stronger.
He said to the priest, who was leaning on his staff.
I truly believed things would be different. But the people, Father, they do not want the very thing they need most. They do not desire to be free of our yoke. Leastways, their desire is not as strong as mine is for them. I could fight her, and her captain, alone, and die to free them. But my death would be in vain. The deaths of so many.
The priest remained silent, looking out into the rain and dark.
My father gave these people a prosperous peace in the chaos. He defended this land and upheld the good laws that make men free, though he was their chieftain. And my dear mother never claimed her royal blood or right to rule over anyone, because she, like my father, believed that laws ought to be enough to govern men without kings. And all this time, I've been fighting to restore this land to what it was then, and the people, God bless them, either do not want it or they do not remember those names. I swore to defend the land, and I failed. What am I to do? Am I not their leader?
Priest Michael turned to face him.
Cardigan, you are failing. But that is because you are their leader, and not merely one of them. It falls upon you to gather your strength, call upon your God, and rise again from these ashes.
How am I their leader? I've no right to...
You are the only one who has the right to lead them. The only living son of Llewellyn the Great, and on your mother's side, the last of a royal line. It is you and only you who has the right to lead these poor people, Cardigan. If you would only lay claim to what is yours. You are a prince. Like it or not, these simple people are not yet ready to govern themselves. But a title they would respect, and you they would follow. You've seen them. They followed you without knowing your right to the crown. Imagine what they would do for you if they only knew.
I lost my brother because of my lineage, remember? As the eldest son, he had the right to inherit our father's title. He hated me for my mother's blood, since it challenged his inheritance. And he's gone. How can I stand up and claim that right? My prayer is that he still lives, as Brother John said he might. As for my mother's blood, I only hope to honor it by living upright. I don't want to be a king, Father. I do not defend these people to gain a position over them. Understand me when I say this. I am no ruler. I am a simple man, perhaps a knight, but not a prince. You taught me that God is the only rightful ruler of men, a teaching from the Holy Book itself. And I am not going to kick against it.
Think of your father, Cardigan. There is a way to hold a title and still let God rule over men. David, the great Hebrew king, was he not a leader who did God's will? Yet he governed the people. Without David, the evil threatening his people would have crushed them. This is what leaders are for, my prince. And this is your destiny. If your brother were meant to do it, he would be here now. For now is the time. Take up your sword and your shield and reveal that you are Prince Cardigan. And I promise you, the people will follow you. You can defeat the witch that way and no other. Perhaps God has arranged that you have royal blood for such a time as this, to be the voice that leads them to freedom from the yoke. Prince Cardigan, now is the time. Only a mighty righteous man can confront a mighty evil. And you are chosen to walk this path. Take heart. God does nothing in half measures. He will be with you.
Cardigan left the cave under cover of darkness. When the weather cleared and the sun looked out on the land once more, there was no small stir over where he might have gone and why. Rumors of him deserting them hung heavy in the air, as if the rain clouds were still overhead. But soon, they didn't need to repeat them, for Cardigan returned. He had gone away alone to pray, as he had been taught that the Lord did many times when he was on the earth. Cardigan knew that if God had called him to lead, He must seek God's will. Alone in the rain, he set out, stopping under a great oak in an overgrown glen, one spot that the fire had not destroyed. There he remained in prayer until the sun was high overhead. When at last he left that place, he was renewed. A man determined to follow through with the task he had been entrusted with. Those who had remained were scattered about, uncertain of what to do now. Cardigan called everyone together. Rhona and Flint were already standing near him and heard him say to the priest that he was ready to do it.
Ready to do what?
Flint whispered to Rhona.
Probably quit. Send everyone home, I don't know.
Rhona was feeling rather out of sorts, angry and discouraged, much like everyone else.
Well, if he gives up, what are we going to do? We can't get home without the stone. It's still in the fortress of a medieval lunatic.
Flint sounded panicked, but Rhona understood why. The same feeling rose in her throat, too. She had finally found a cause to believe in, a genuine reason to risk her life, and it just didn't seem fair that the leader would up and quit. She searched herself for an answer to Flint's question, then replied,
We'll just have to get rid of her ourselves.
Flint looked shocked, but said nothing. For once, he and Rhona had a common goal: survival. People were milling about them now. Cardigan stood up on a blackened stump.
My friends, we have labored long, and it seems victory is impossible. But the Holy Book says that with God nothing shall be impossible. It is not our will which we seek to accomplish, it is His will. Therefore we cannot quit, as the Lady Rhona has said, for the Lord Himself is on our side. I shall continue to resist the enchantress Zorreale with all my power, and even my life, should it be required. If any of you would join me, you would be most welcome. I only know that this is what I must do.
Cardigan stepped off the stump. Everyone was quiet until the priest came from the shadows. Addressing the ragged little group, he faced them, looking mightier than a mere clergyman.
Before you stands the heir to the throne. He alone in all of Wales has the right to demand your service, yet does not. From the bloodline of the great Arthur himself. Would you follow a prince who lives as one of you, a prince who fights for you? What say you?
His voice thundered above them, echoing like a roar. A murmur among them rose until the huntsman said,
Aye!
In uncanny unison, every man raised his fist to his heart in pledge. A chorus of agreement rippled through them all. Cardigan's eyes filled with fire. They shone clear and blue as the sky. He asked them all to kneel. Again, courage and strength had been summoned. Again, the people needed reminding of their cause, and again, Cardigan asked for their loyalty.
Let's hope it sticks this time.
Everyone knelt on the wet ground, including Rhona and Flint. Cardigan then knelt himself and prayed.
Unto you I lift up my eyes, O you who are enthroned in heaven. Behold, as the eyes of servants look to the hand of their master, and as the eyes of a maid to the hand of her mistress, so our eyes look to the Lord our God, until He has mercy and loving kindness for us. Have mercy on us, O Lord, have mercy on us. For we have endured no end of contempt. We have endured no end of ridicule from the arrogant and the proud. For your mercy and loving kindness are great toward us, and the truth and faithfulness of the Lord endure forever. Praise the Lord. Amen.
Prince Cardigan stood with the priest beside him.
Long live Prince Cardigan!
Shouted Priest Michael, and the others shouted it back in unison. Cardigan then appointed Priest Michael, Ed, Smith, and the huntsman, whose name was Abel, as counselors. Rhona and Flint were asked to attend Cardigan as his friends and guests. we're going to take just a minute to hear from our awesome sponsors who make this show possible.
This episode of 1232 is sponsored in part by Oasis Family Media and its family of companies including Oasis Audio, Enclave Publishing, and Sky Turtle Press, publishers of the forthcoming epic Edmund Spenser's The Fairy Queen, rendered in modern prose by Rebecca K. Reynolds and illustrated by Justin Gerard. For more information, visit fairyqueen.com. That's fairyqueen.com, or find the link in the description below.
Hello, 1232 listeners. This is Callie Sioux, and I'm excited to tell you about Dramify, the ultimate platform for creators and fans of audio dramas. With oodles of genres, hundreds of shows, and thousands of episodes, Dramify is your go-to streaming service exclusively for family-friendly audio dramas. Whether you're a devoted listener or a creator of a family-friendly masterpiece, Dramify has something for you. And guess what, 1232 listeners? You can now enjoy 1232 on Dramify. Just go to dramify.com/1232. That's DRAMAFY.com/1232 and get started for free. Happy listening. And now, back to the show. The little air of ceremony, such as it was, turned Rhona off. She snuck away as soon as she could, not at all interested. But she was glad that Cardigan didn't quit. That was very encouraging. Flint seemed to be swept away by it all. It felt like a movie. It was simply the propriety that everyone was now aware of in the presence of royalty. Cardigan behaved no differently than before, except that he was bent toward his goal with an unshakable resolve, whereas before, he was merely trying. Flint observed the customs keenly, taking part where he could, but all the while a nagging question pestered his mind. It drove him to distraction until at last he had to ask someone. That evening, it threatened rain once more, and most everyone had found their own dry place in the cave, leaving the council to deliberate in a corner. Flint was the only one still stirring about. He was looking for someone to talk to, someone who could clarify things for him. He was in luck when the council held an intermission, and he fell into stride with the priest when he walked outside.
Father, if I may join you, I've got some questions.
Of course, Flint. I shall try to give you the answers you seek.
Sir, I wondered about Cardigan's bloodline. I thought I heard you say this morning that he was a descendant of King Arthur. Of course I was mistaken. I should really learn to pay attention because we all know Arthur had no heirs, if that story is even true. But, and you probably think this is funny, that's actually what I thought you said.
Flint chuckled nervously as he spoke.
That is what I said.
You've got a terrific sense of humor, but seriously, man, I mean, who is Cardigan really? Arthur and Guinevere had no children, according to Arthurian legend, so why try to connect Cardigan to King Arthur? It's almost silly it's so phony. Come on. I mean, we aren't even sure King Arthur existed. He was more than likely a Roman legionnaire.
Flint would have kept babbling if the priest hadn't stopped and froze him in his gaze.
Arthur had a son, and he was never associated with Lady Guinevere. You, from the future, have no way of knowing it, but Arthur married the Lady of Shalott, the Lady of the Lake. She was a mysterious woman, to be sure, and hid their child when Mordred rose to power. She saved him, and though he never ruled Camelot, he was a mighty man-at-arms. He is Cardigan's grandfather, his mother's father.
Wait, what? I can't. I'm not sure I'm hearing you right. You mean Arthur actually was? He really lived? And he didn't marry Guinevere? Well, who'd she end up with?
Flint was reeling now. His mind was blown.
Are we talking about the same Arthur, King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table, right?
Yes, Flint, the very same.
The priest had a deadpan expression. There was a glinting twinkle in his eye.
You're not joking.
I assure you, my boy, I am sincere. And to answer your inquiry of Lady Guinevere, she married one of Arthur's knights, Sir Lancelot du Lac.
No, this isn't right.
Flint blurted out, waving his arms wildly.
You have the stories backwards. Arthur married Guinevere, who cheated on him with Lancelot. And in the poem, the Lady of Shalott had a crush on Lancelot. She wasn't even real. And Arthur had no heirs, which is why Camelot passed into legend and didn't survive. You have everything mixed up.
Flint panicked now, excited about this new information, but still in the throes of disbelief.
Do you not wonder, my boy, that it is more likely that you have the story backward? After all, your time in history is much further removed from the time of Arthur. And proof of Cardigan's bloodline is quite plain. Simply ask to examine his sword.
The priest was still quite calm.
Dude, you're a man of the cloth or whatever. You can't lie. You're not saying he carries Excalibur, are you? That's outrageous. I suppose you'll tell me Merlin is real too, probably still alive or something. This is all just too fantastic.
Flint was grinning now, but a strange grin, which seemed to communicate that he was going into some sort of intellectual shock.
Why, yes, of course. Merlin still lives. Though he is not now the man he had always been. He is a better version of himself, I think.
When Priest Michael said this, he smiled and saluted Flint and walked away. Flint plopped down on a stump, staring after him. He sat for a few silent moments, trying to absorb it all. Suddenly, he leapt up and took off running, muttering to himself that he had to tell Rhona right away. Flint barreled around some undergrowth, talking to himself, and fell headlong over something that sent him sprawling in the mud. He jumped up. The skinny hound that he had made friends with was licking him to death.
Hey there, Scooby. I guess I tripped over you, huh? Where have you been, huh, girl? Oh, it's so good to see you. Good dog. Come on, let's find Rhona.
Flint patted the dog's head and jogged off, perhaps a little less enthusiastic now. The hound bounded beside him, tongue lolling to the side, appearing as happy as it could be to have rejoined Flint.
Rhona! Rhona! I have something to tell you!
Flint shouted when he heard her in a clearing. She was looking Hero over closely, albeit slowly. Her ribs and butt bone ached from her wild ride, her muscles still sore and tense. Dafydd was with her, but he was huddled under a blanket in a little makeshift shelter nearby.
King Arthur is real, and he didn't marry Guinevere. He and Lady of the Lake had a kid who was Cardigan's grandfather, and Merlin is still alive. Isn't this just the craziest stuff you've ever heard?
Flint was excited again, much like when they were children. He hovered, wide-eyed, over Rhona as she picked up Hero's front hoof to examine it. She put the horse's leg down and faced him, knowing she'd better cut him off before he went into hysterics.
That's awesome, Flint. Very cool. Who told you all this?
Rhona was humoring him for the time being, while her attention was diverted to her horse.
The priest told me. If he's right, then Cardigan could end up being like the king. Pretty wild, right?
Flint continued talking, and Rhona just nodded and gave him an occasional, yeah, now and then. She was observing the hound, while Flint talked on and on. The hound's eyes darted between the siblings, listening intently. It sat up tall, its ears alert, one front leg poised for motion, but as yet still like a statue. Its eyes scanned the clearing again and again.
Hey, Flint, there's something really weird about that dog.
Rhona said, quickly walking over and picking up a sleepy Dafydd.
What?
Flint was interrupted in the middle of his monologue, startled at Rhona's abruptness.
Come on, Rhona. Just because you don't like it.
No, Flint, there's something wrong with it. Where has she been? How did she survive the fire?
Rhona carried Dafydd up toward the cave.
I've got to tell the guys about this. Maybe they'll do something about it this time.
Seriously, you're that worried about it?
Yeah, I am.
She put her head down and walked faster. Dafydd was still asleep and quite heavy to carry, so she handed him to Flint. Confused, Flint took the sleeping boy until they got to the cave, where he laid him down by the fire. Prince Cardigan and the council were discussing things on the other end of the cavern, their muffled voices echoing through the whole place.
You can't just interrupt the prince.
Flint began, hesitant even to enter the cave.
Prince? He's still the same dirty prisoner we rescued, remember?
Rhona said over her shoulder as she marched up to the council. As she drew nearer, they all stopped talking.
We were only just discussing you and your brother. Come.
The priest said, gesturing at Flint to come nearer. Rhona and Flint joined their circle, but didn't sit.
You have both proven to be loyal to the prince, and we heartily welcome your presence among us. Your father, Brother John, would be so proud to see you both serving of one accord a cause greater than yourselves. You are trustworthy. Pray listen to our request.
Priest Michael was his usual kind self, his voice deep and slow, making his words sound even more important. Flint stole a sideways glance at Rhona, who still had a deer-in-the-headlights expression on her face. He felt jittery and couldn't bring himself to look at Cardigan in the eye anymore.
Will you serve as officers of rank? Flint, will you be knighted and given a horse and sword and armor when we get some? I wish for you to be my personal guard. And Lady Rhona, a knighthood, or shall we say, shield maiden position for you? If you are willing, you will be trained with sword and horse and other weaponry. Does this suit you?
Prince Cardigan asked, still very much the grinning, shining-eyed fellow they had sprung from a cell a couple months ago, even if he was now a person of notoriety. Flint had grabbed Rhona's arm while Cardigan spoke. She thought he was about to faint, so she elbowed him in the ribs.
Well,
she began, somewhat hesitant to speak her mind. Flint beat her to it.
Yeah, we can handle that, I think, sire.
Flint said nervously, holding back his usual chattering with great effort. He looked like he was trying to swallow something.
I'm with Flint. I'm pretty sure we can handle that. Well, I know I can. When do we start training?
Rhona was standing in a rigid stance, feet wide apart, hands clasped behind her back. Flint was wringing his hands and shifting his weight back and forth. The comedic contrast in their reactions had Cardigan chuckling, and provoked one of the priest's eyebrows to raise.
Good. You can begin as soon as we acquire a safe place to camp for the winter. After the council is dismissed, we can discuss it more.
Prince Cardigan said cheerfully, sending the priest a mischievous glance as he clasped his shoulder. There was an inside joke in that somewhere, for all the others chuckled too.
Okay, what time?
It was Rhona's turn to enjoy the humor. All the others were puzzled by his question.
Flint, you'd be late anyway. You don't have your watch.
A wry laugh escaped her before she said to Cardigan,
Yes, sir. We will be ready.
Cardigan laughed and pulled on his shirt sleeve, revealing the watch that John Thatcher had given him before he had been thrown in Zorreale's dungeon. He got up, and whilst laughing, unbuckled it from his wrist and held it out to Flint.
It's time you have this. I was not late to my own rescue thanks to this, and of course, the service you have both done for me. It is, after all, your father's.
Cardigan took Flint's extended wrist and buckled it in place. Flint stood speechless, gulping down a flood of emotions. He extended his now watched wrist for a handshake. Cardigan took it heartily and pulled Flint into an embrace. Rhona broke the silence.
Another thing, Cardigan, and the rest of you guys should listen up, too. I really think we need to deal with the spy issue. Ed and I think that Flint's dog could be relaying messages somehow. Maybe like a carrier pigeon?
Priest Michael stroked his beard, and Cardigan sighed.
This is grave indeed, and we will discuss it. Thank you, Lady Rhona.
The priest said, folding his hands. She turned on her heel and walked off, pulling Flint behind her by the sleeve.
Sir Flint, a knight of Breconshire. Has a lovely ring to it, doesn't it?
Flint's mouth was agape. Rhona shrugged.
We were still gonna fight, with or without all that title stuff.
Do you not understand the significance? Not only did I get knighted, but you will be knighted. Girls don't get knighted. The prince must really like you.
Flint smiled to himself.
Or he sees me as an equal, a friend, and knows I can fight just as good as anybody else.
Rhona rolled her eyes. Flint thought about that for a second.
Yeah, you could be right. He is a justice warrior type person.
Rhona squared her shoulders and carried her head high.
I wonder if Dad would be proud of me.
Flint thought, as he puffed out his chest and walked in stride with his equally proud but shorter sister. It was clear now that there was no turning back for the brother and sister, and Cardigan, claiming his title, was the one thing that had the power to unite the country. But that also meant They had in fact chosen a side in a conflict with an uncertain outcome. Rhona and Flint now had an enemy, a very real and powerful one. Until now, they had been swept along in a story that had no part for them to play. But that had all changed. If their side lost, the two of them would lose their lives for certain. While this reality may have crossed their minds, it was a major point of concern for Prince Cardigan, the priest, and the others. They knew what they had asked of the two strangers, even if they themselves did not. And so the training was even more important. Prince Cardigan wanted Flint and Rhona to have a fighting chance and, if at all possible, an eternal future. The council that night conceived a plan. Cardigan and the priest, along with Flint and Rhona, would travel through Snowdonia to gather an army from the Chieftains to the north. It was his title and his father's good name that would leverage the response in his favor, he hoped. They would leave Edward and Smith in charge of the resistance and the fortified castle at Rekindling. If Cardigan was unsuccessful in raising a force to defeat Zorreale for good, then at least the people who had joined him and sacrificed so much would have a chance. They would leave immediately for Rekindling and pray Lord Ganvi would be sympathetic to their plight. Knowing the enchantress and her captain would hunt any survivors made everyone extra careful. But not even the highest level of precaution could keep the news from spreading that there might be hope.
You've been listening to episode 27 of 1232, produced by RumbleStump Entertainment. Written by Callie, Sioux, and Cheyenne Belle. Narrated by Callie, Sioux. Today's voice talents include Matt Burke as Cardigan, Robyn Cage as Rhona Thatcher, Corey Keller as Flint Thatcher, Sid Goodloe as Priest Michael. This episode was mixed and engineered by Jet Black, with editing and sound design by Casey Caballero Sounds. Music by Callie, Sioux, and Jet Black. Static Line, the 1232 theme, is now available wherever you listen to music. Mastered by Zach Bryant, 9-Man Mastering, and cover art by Niall C. Grant. Continue the adventure in episode 28.